Night descended over Houston, bringing with it a biting chill carried by gusts of wind sweeping through the deserted streets. Mia Turner stood alone before an old ATM tucked away in a street corner, the faint blue glow from the screen illuminating her face and highlighting her anxious brown eyes. She pulled her gray woolen coat tighter around herself, her breath forming fragile wisps of white vapor in the frigid air. The city felt unnaturally quiet tonight. No blaring car horns, no murmur of passing pedestrians, only the whistling wind rushing past weathered streetlights. Their flickering beams cast patchy light onto the cracked sidewalk, creating long, distorted black shadows that stretched and twisted like invisible arms reaching out from the darkness. Beside her, Shadow, a German shepherd once part of Houston's K-9 unit, sat still on the cold pavement. His thick black and tan coat glimmered faintly under the dim streetlight, his pointed ears perked up like twin radars, and his sharp amber eyes scanned every hidden corner of the street. Though retired for over a year, Shadow retained the majestic bearing of a warrior, muscular and taut, his stance vigilant, his protective instincts as keen as ever. Mia tapped her pin into the ATM's keypad, her frozen fingers trembling slightly as a wave of unease stirred within her. She told herself it was just her imagination, but her heart beat faster, as if sensing something lurking in the shadows. Then she heard it, slow, deliberate footsteps echoing from behind, the sound of leather soles scraping against the asphalt. Mia froze, her breath catching in her throat. Before she could turn, a voice, cold and sharp as a blade, sliced through the silence. "Don't move! Hand over the cash!" A shiver ran down her spine, spreading through her body like an electric current. This wasn't a random robbery. The voice carried a calculated danger, devoid of any tremor or panic. But the figure behind her didn't know one crucial thing: Mia wasn't alone. Shadow, her loyal companion, was right there, and he would never let harm come to her. Mia turned slowly, forcing herself to stay calm despite her heart pounding as if it might burst from her chest. Before her stood a tall, lanky figure in a black hoodie, the hood pulled low to shroud his face, revealing only a pair of narrow eyes glinting with malice under the flickering streetlight. In his right hand, a small dagger gleamed, its razor-sharp steel reflecting the faint light like a silent threat. "Hurry up!" he snapped, his voice growing harsher, laced with impatience. "Give me the money, or don't blame me for what happens next." Mia gripped the stack of bills she'd just withdrawn from the ATM, the thin dollars clinging to her sweaty palm. Running wasn't an option, the street was too empty, and she wasn't fast enough to outpace a man with a knife. But if she handed over the cash, would he truly let her go? Shadow growled, a deep, resonant sound, like distant thunder rolling in, sending a tremor through the air. The thug hesitated briefly, his gaze flicking toward Shadow, betraying a flicker of doubt for the first time. He had made a fatal mistake, overlooking the dog trained to confront the most dangerous of foes. "Damn it!" he muttered, stepping back half a pace, though his eyes remained fixed on the knife, as if weighing his next move. Mia took a deep breath, steadying her voice despite the chaos swirling inside her. "Get out of here!" He stood still for a moment, his narrowed eyes sizing her up. Then, without warning, he lunged, the knife slashing upward in a swift, curving arc. But Shadow was faster. A piercing bark tore through the night, sharp as an arrow, reverberating off the old brick walls lining the street. It was followed by a powerful leap. Shadow sprang forward, his entire body a living missile aimed straight at the thug. The man had no time to react. Shadow's gleaming white teeth clamped down on the wrist holding the knife, the force so intense that the blade clattered to the pavement, ringing against the cold concrete. The thug screamed, a mix of pain and terror echoing through the stillness. He thrashed wildly, swinging his free hand in a desperate attempt to strike Shadow's head, but the dog didn't flinch. Forged by hundreds of hours of training, Shadow pinned him to the ground, his massive front paws pressing down on the man's shoulders, his amber eyes blazing with unwavering focus. Mia stood frozen, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her heart hammering in her chest. She had never seen Shadow move with such speed and ferocity since his days in the K-9 unit, a perfect fighting machine now devoted solely to her protection. From a shadowed corner, another voice emerged, low and menacing. Let him go, or you're dead. Mia spun around, her blood turning to ice as a second thug stepped out from a nearby alley. He was taller and broader, his muscles bulging beneath a tattered jacket, his scarred face illuminated under the flickering streetlight. In his hands he held a long, rusted steel pipe, its metallic sheen flashing with every movement. Mia's stomach twisted. This wasn't just a robbery, it was a trap. Her pulse raced, but she fought to keep her mind clear. The second thug advanced, his bloodshot eyes glowing with brutality. He gripped the pipe tightly, his knuckles widening from the force. Let him go! He snarled, his voice a guttural rasp like that of a wild beast. Or I'll smash that dog's head in right now. Shadow showed no fear. His growl rumbled forth like a defiant challenge, deep and unyielding, his ears erect, his body taut as a coiled spring ready to unleash. Mia's mind raced. Running wouldn't work, the streets stretched too far, and she couldn't abandon Shadow. Handing over the money? Would they spare her, or kill them both to silence her? No, she wouldn't let fear dictate her actions tonight. The thug with the pipe sneered wickedly, then swung with full force, aiming a crushing blow at Shadow's head. But Shadow was prepared. As the pipe descended, he released the first thug, pivoted with lightning speed, and leapt. The impact resounded with a harsh thud. The second thug was hurled backward, crashing onto the pavement, the pipe slipping from his grasp and rolling away to stop near a storm drain. He groaned, clutching his chest, his face contorted in pain and disbelief. Mia didn't hesitate. She darted forward, kicking the pipe farther out of reach with all her strength, ensuring neither thug could reclaim it. The first thug, still cradling his bleeding wrist, looked up at Shadow with abject terror. That dog's a demon! He shouted, his voice breaking with fear. The second thug lay pinned beneath Shadow's weight, the dog's powerful paws holding him immobile. Shadow's jaws hovered mere inches from his throat, hot breath puffing from his nostrils like a final warning. Mia stepped closer, gazing down at the trapped man, her voice icy. If I let you go, you disappear immediately. Understand? He nodded frantically, his bloodshot eyes wide with desperation. Mia drew a breath, then let out a short, sharp whistle, a signal Shadow had been trained to obey since his canine days. Instantly, Shadow stepped back, but he remained poised, muscles taut, his gaze never wavering from the two thugs, ready to strike if they dared move. The attackers needed no further prompting. They scrambled to their feet, the first clutching his arm, the second his chest, and stumbled away, fleeing into the dark alley, their panicked footsteps fading into the night. Mia exhaled, resting her hand on Shadow's head, feeling his thick fur and the steady, powerful rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her trembling palm. Adrenaline still coursed through her veins, making her hands shake uncontrollably. The street fell silent once more, save for the wind whistling through the lampposts, and her own labored breathing. The danger seemed to have passed, until headlights flared at the end of the road. Mia froze, her breath still uneven, her pulse pounding in her ears like a drumbeat. Shadow tensed, the fur on his neck bristling, his eyes locked on the darkness ahead. A sleek black SUV, its sharp lines resembling a predatory beast, rolled slowly down the empty street, its headlights sweeping the pavement like the eyes of a stalker. Mia tightened her grip on Shadow's leash, her throat dry, a fresh wave of fear rising within her. The vehicle stopped a few meters away, its engine rumbling low like the growl of a waiting monster. The driver's window slid down slowly, revealing a man inside. He was unlike the two fleeing thugs, no trace of their street-level panic or aggression. He wore a glossy black leather coat, his angular face framed by deep, frigid eyes that exuded absolute control. Well done, he said, his voice smooth yet cutting, like a blade wrapped in velvet. Shadow growled, a deep rumble rising from his throat, his fur standing on end in warning. The man glanced at the dog, the corner of his mouth lifting into a faint, almost mocking smile. Smart dog. You should teach it some restraint. Mia said nothing, her every sense screaming that this man was more dangerous than anyone she'd ever encountered. He tilted his head, his piercing eyes boring into her. My men came running back, pale as ghosts, babbling about a four-legged monster, he said, his tone dropping, accompanied by a soft chuckle devoid of warmth. You've just made a big mistake, Mia Turner. She flinched, her blood turning cold. He knew her name. He knew who she was. The SUV began to move, its engine purring as it pulled away, but before vanishing into the night, he turned back, leaving her with a chilling parting shot. Don't be foolish enough to stick your nose where it doesn't belong, unless you want to regret it. Mia stood rooted to the spot, her eyes fixed on the road where the SUV had disappeared, her shaky breath escaping her parched lips. This wasn't just a failed robbery, she had stumbled into something far larger, far darker, a danger she hadn't even begun to comprehend. Shadow pressed against her leg, his amber eyes looking up at her, sensing the unease flooding her mind. Mia took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, then reached into her coat pocket for her phone. Her trembling fingers dialed a number she knew by heart. The line rang twice before a familiar, gravelly voice answered. Mia, it's late. Where are you? Ryan asked immediately, his voice sharpening as all traces of sleepiness vanished. It wasn't just a robbery, Ryan. The leader, he knew my name. A heavy silence hung over the line for a moment, then Ryan's tone turned cold, as if he just grasped something grave. Send me your location now. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Mia hung up, her hand still clutching the phone, her gaze dropping to Shadow. She ran her fingers through his thick fur, feeling the warmth and strength radiating from the dog as a way to steady herself. Ryan was on his way, but a gut feeling warned her that the danger was far from over. Suddenly, Shadow tensed, his ears shooting upright, his eyes fixating on the darkness at the end of the street. Mia turned, a chilling dread creeping up her spine. In the distance, headlights flared again, the black SUV was back, and this time it wasn't creeping along to observe. It barreled toward her at a terrifying speed. Damn it, Mia muttered, tightening her grip on Shadow's leash and stepping back a few paces toward the brick wall behind her. The vehicle screeched to a halt less than 10 meters away, kicking up a cloud of dust under its glaring headlights. The doors swung open, and two figures emerged. Mia recognized one of them, the thug with the steel pipe from earlier, his scarred face now twisted with rage. But this time, he wasn't wielding a pipe, he held a sleek black pistol, its metallic surface glinting under the streetlight. Don't run, Mia! He sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. We just want to talk. Shadow growled, stepping forward to shield her, his fur bristling, his bared teeth poised to tear into anyone who dared approach. The thug's hand drifted toward the gun's trigger, but before he could act, another light sliced through the darkness. Tires screeched against the pavement as a gray pickup truck roared in at breakneck speed, braking hard right in front of Mia, forming a barrier between her and the two thugs. The door flew open, and Ryan Carter leapt out, his tall frame clad in a worn leather jacket, his sharp brown eyes scanning the enemies with icy precision. Get in now! He barked, his voice cutting like a blade. Mia didn't hesitate. She yanked the truck door open, and Shadow leapt onto the back seat with a swift, graceful bound. She followed, slamming the door shut behind her. Ryan floored the gas, the truck roaring to life as it peeled away, the black SUV hot on their tail. Mia glanced back through the rearview mirror, watching the SUV's headlights clink stubbornly to their trail. They're not giving up, she said, her voice tight with tension, her hand gripping Shadow's leash. Ryan clenched the steering wheel, his jaw set, his eyes locked on the road ahead. They don't know who I am yet, he muttered, his tone low but brimming with confidence. But they're about to find out. With a sudden jerk of the wheel, he veered onto a narrow, desolate road leading into the forested outskirts of Houston. The truck's engine roared, kicking up dust and dry leaves as they sped forward at a dizzying pace. Mia held Shadow close, feeling his heartbeat thrum in sync with her own racing pulse. This wasn't over, it had only just begun. After a long stretch through the dark forest, Ryan pulled up to a small wooden cabin nestled deep among towering trees. Pale moonlight filtered through the canopy, casting a faint glow on the moss-covered roof, lending it an air of mystery yet safety. "Get inside," Ryan ordered, his voice low but firm. Mia opened the door, and Shadow hopped out, pausing to sniff the air, his ears perked and body rigid as if he still sensed danger lurking in the shadows. She followed Ryan into the cabin, Shadow staying close by her side, never straying more than a step away. Inside, the cabin was compact but fortified, thick steel doors, bulletproof windows, and a surveillance camera system mounted in the corner. A locked metal gun cabinet stood against one wall, next to an old wooden table scarred with scratches. Ryan walked over, pouring 2 cups of coffee from a cooled steel thermos and setting one in front of Mia. "Sit down and tell me everything," he said, his tone calm but carrying the gravity of someone who'd faced countless perilous situations. Mia sank into a hard wooden chair, her hand still clutching Shadow's leash. She took a deep breath and began recounting the night, from the moment she stood at the ATM, the faint chemical whiff she'd caught from the first thug, the sudden attack, to the man in the black SUV and his chilling warning. When she mentioned that he knew her name, Ryan's brow furrowed, his deep brown eyes flickering with concern. Without a word, he opened the laptop on the table, typed a rapid series of commands, and turned the screen toward her. A file popped up: Victor Calloway, ex-military, dishonorably discharged for extreme violence, now the leader of a criminal syndicate specializing in robbery, smuggling, and abduction. His photo appeared, angular features, piercing eyes, and a faint scar running from his temple to his jaw. "He's not some petty thug," Ryan said, his voice dropping. "He runs a network, an empire of crime." Mia's eyes fell to a line below. "High threat level to K9 units." She looked up, confusion clouding her face. "What do you mean?" Ryan pointed at Shadow, sitting beside her, his amber eyes sweeping the room. "Calloway has a vendetta against K9 dogs. Years ago, he planned a major heist, stealing military weapons from a secret stash. It was nearly flawless until a K9 named Titan tracked him down. Titan bit his arm, held him until the cops arrived. Calloway lost everything, his career, his power, his freedom, all because of one dog. And now he's targeting Shadow." Mia stiffened, her hand instinctively stroking Shadow's fur. The dog knew nothing of that history, yet somehow, his instincts had sensed Calloway's threat from the start. "He won't stop," Ryan said, his voice resolute. "You humiliated him in front of his crew. For Calloway, that's personal." Mia swallowed hard, fear mingling with a rising resolve. "So what do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling but not weak. Ryan met her gaze, his eyes hard as steel. "We get ready." He stood, crossed to the gun cabinet, and unlocked it with a small key from his jacket pocket. Inside lay an arsenal, pistols, shotguns, all neatly arranged. He pulled out a Glock 19, checked the magazine, and slid it across the table to Mia. "Take it," he said. Mia stared at the gun, her palms slick with sweat. "They won't come that fast," she murmured, trying to convince herself. Ryan let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "Mia, what kind of man is Calloway? He doesn't forgive, and he doesn't wait." Abruptly, Shadow sprang up, growling fiercely, his ears erect, his eyes fixed on the window. Mia froze, her heart pounding. Ryan grabbed an AR-15 from the cabinet, darted to the window, and peeked through the curtain. He cursed under his breath. "Son of a bitch." In the distance, headlights pierced the trees, not one pair, but 3, accompanied by the grinding crunch of tires on gravel, like the roar of a pack of beasts. They'd found them. "Kill the lights!" Ryan shouted, his voice sharp as a blade. Mia lunged for the switch, plunging the cabin into total darkness. Outside, car doors slammed shut, followed by a low, cold voice she knew too well. "Mia Turner, no more hide and seek." Shadow's growl intensified, his muscles coiled like a spring ready to snap. A shiver ran through Mia. Calloway was here, and he'd brought an army. Bang! The first gunshot shattered the forest stillness. Window glass exploded, shards raining onto the wooden floor. Shadow bolted through a narrow side door, swift as a black lightning bolt. A thug screamed as the massive German shepherd slammed into him, knocking him flat, jaws locking onto his gun arm. Gunfire erupted in the icy air. Ryan raised his AR-15, aimed through the door crack, and fired. Bang! Another thug crumpled, his weapon clattering onto the leaf-strewn ground. Mia trembled but didn't stay still. She spotted a third thug in the shadows, his gun trained on Shadow. Without thinking, she raised the Glock, steadied it with both hands, and squeezed the trigger. Bang! The bullet struck his shoulder, eliciting a pained cry as he staggered back, blood staining his jacket. Amid the chaos, Calloway stood motionless, a ghostly figure in his black leather coat, his deep eyes observing with eerie calm as his men fell one by one. Shadow held his prey down, teeth buried deep in the man's arm, blood trickling onto the dirt. The thug thrashed, pleading, "Get him off me, please!" But no one dared approach. Calloway surveyed the scene, his eyes narrowing as he realized the tide had turned. He clenched his jaw, anger flashing in his gaze, but his voice remained icy. "Fall back!" His remaining men scrambled to the SUV, dragging the wounded along, their frantic footsteps echoing through the forest. Mia stood still, her breathing ragged, her grip tight on the Glock, her eyes locked on Calloway. He stared back, his gaze piercing the darkness like frozen daggers. Then, just before climbing into the vehicle, he flashed a faint, chilling smile. "Think this is over, Mia Turner?" His voice was low, thick with deadly promise. "This is just the prelude." The SUV's engine roared to life, tires screeching on gravel as it tore off, vanishing into the forest's dense night. Mia's hand fell limp, the Glock dropping to the floor with a soft clack. She sank to her knees beside Shadow, wrapping her arms around him, feeling his warmth and steady heartbeat through his thick fur. Ryan approached, lowering his rifle, exhaling a long breath as his eyes swept over the cabin, now littered with broken glass and shell casings. "It's done," he said, his voice calm yet certain, a quiet anchor amid the storm. Mia looked up, her eyes blurred by adrenaline and lingering fear. "Is it really over?" she whispered, her voice quavering. Shadow turned, pressing his nose into her hand, his amber eyes softening as if to assure her the threat had passed, at least for now. Ryan leaned against the doorframe, wiping sweat from his brow, a faint smirk breaking through the grime on his face. "You've got one hell of a dog, Mia. Shadow didn't just save you, he saved me too." Mia bent down, hugging Shadow tighter, burying her face in his fur. "He's not just a dog," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Shadow's family." The night settled into silence, the wind whistling through the forest now carrying a fragile sense of peace. But deep down, Mia Kn